Hello, and welcome to the WPAOG podcast. This episode features an interview with John Nawoichyk and Michael Mazzocco, graduates from the United States Military Academy at West Point, class of 1993. John currently serves as the Senior Associate Athletic Director for Cadet Wellness and Operations at West Point. He joined the department in June 2018 after retiring as a lieutenant colonel with over 25 years of service in the Army. John holds a Master of Arts in History from Western Illinois University. Michael is the founder of Alytic, Inc., providing management and professional services, engineering analysis, and technology development to clients. After graduating from West Point with a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering, he joined the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers as an officer. Michael holds a Master of Science in Engineering Management from the University of Missouri, Rolla. In this episode, John and Michael talk about the importance of maintaining historical accuracy in film, recreating the West Point experience on the big screen, and working alongside director Scott Cooper on the set of The Pale Blue Eye. Now please enjoy this interview between John Nawoichyk, Michael Mazzocco, and your host, myself, Jamie Enos. Hey, Mike. Hey, John. Thanks for coming on the WPAOG podcast this week. We are so glad to have you after this great success that The Pale Blue Eye has had on Netflix. And your role on this is just so intriguing to all of our grads. They've been following along. And so to have you here and get some little Q&A, this is just a fantastic opportunity. I really appreciate you guys coming on.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Let's jump right into it. How did you all get involved with The Pale Blue Eye? And what was the time commitment for supporting that?
It was really interesting. Our good friend Jeff Reynolds reached out to us, and he had been working with Scott Cooper and in the process, and just basically was looking for somebody who had understood drill and ceremony, who understood West Point, who had a history background. And being a retired lieutenant colonel, I was a history major here at West Point. My master's degree is in history, and having been the USCC operations officer, overseeing all drill and ceremony, it kind of worked really well. And when they started to tell us, we went through a series of interviews, a lot of phone calls, first lower levels, and then eventually with Scott Cooper himself. We got to the point where they were talking about how many, cadet actors and military actors over 80. I said, hey, I'm going to need some help with this, especially with the level of training in a short period of time. And that's when I reached out to my best friend and classmate, Mike. So, Mike, I'll let you take it from there.
Sure. I don't have any industry experience, believe it or not, Jamie. I'm a distant relative to Billy Barty, and where I grew up in Western PA. Jimmy Stewart and Charles Bronson were kind of known names, so I'm dating myself a little bit, but probably half the audience, that they probably don't even know who those people are. So, when John reached out to me, he said, best friend, want to help a buddy out. We share a love of history, John and I. Like when he visits here and where I live in Virginia, we've gone out to Chancellorsville. We've done a staff ride at Gettysburg together. And just recently when John and Grant were visiting, we went down to the Garrett Farm where John Wilkes Booth was killed. So kind of based on that, that commonality, love for history. I think John reached out to me. And at first, I wasn't even going to do it. I had a day job at the time. I was working on a startup. I'm like, how in the world am I going to do this? But kind of the women in my life, my girlfriend and my sisters, they really encouraged me to accept this opportunity. So I said, John, send me the script. I read the script. And I echo some of the concerns that some of the old grads had, about how cadets were portrayed. How West Point was portrayed. So I consulted again with my family and my friends. Ultimately, I chose to move forward. But, I justified in my mind that the movie was going to get made kind of with or without me. This was a great opportunity that John presented me with. And I really, I wanted to help him out and kind of explore more than what I do on a day-to-day basis. I just didn't, like I said, I didn't have that background. So I'm really glad I did. I'm proud of the work that John and I did and how we represented West Point, on set and, and how the final product turned out. Made great friendships. It's led to new work for John and I, for the people we met. I worked on Chief of War in Hawaii over November and December. John's working on another project potentially, coming from this opportunity. And we've been contacted by old grads, trying to help them find their way in the film industry. So overall, just been a great opportunity. And the time commitment, this thing started last, I'd say November, Thanksgiving of November 22. I'd say about 40 or so days of filming, weekends and holidays off. And so John and I kind of went through the script and the scenes, and we divided and conquered. They flew us in normally on a Sunday. We'd stay till, Thursday or a Wednesday and pick the scenes that we'd have the most impact in.
So with the academic historian and then a little bit of a hobbyist history buff, maybe, is that a good summation?
That's a great way to explain it. And one of the things that really want to highlight is when you talk about the people involved in this, we had the people who were on the set, whether it was a prop master, the armorers, all of them, they're experts in their trade. And what we provided, Mike and I, were some specificity to the historical accuracy. And then Mike Diaz from the museum, right outside the gate, the West Point Museum, was really a technical expert. So when you look at things like the tar bucket, which was a common question across the board, the pale blue eye people went and studied at the West Point Museum, got the exact dimensions of the tar bucket from that time that you can actually go to the museum and see now, which is really exciting. And then they reproduced them in different places across the world. Some of the uniforms were made in Italy, some were made in Budapest. That's a level of detail that Scott and his team went to make sure that he had the right people advising, that he had right people involved, and that they had the right quality of product to represent the Academy. And that was extremely important to him.
Yeah. And so you mentioned Scott, meaning Scott Cooper, the director for the film. And did you have a specific role in that support there where you were directly with him? Was it more in the pre-production or during production phases? Or what did that even look like in the post-production? Because obviously a lot of research and time went into that, getting everything straight.
Yeah. So there's really almost 3 phases of the operation, if we use the military terminology. So phase 1 of the operation was preparation. And that was all the research. There were multiple phone conversations and visits by the Pale Blue Eye staff to West Point, reviewing of the script, going to the museum. I mean, we spent hours on the phone with Mike Diaz, Scott, Chris, who is the first producer. You start adding all that time up. That really happened in October and beginning of November, as well as then we ran the boot camp the week of Thanksgiving. And then that rolled into during the execution phase of it, either Mike or I were standing right next to Scott Cooper. Probably one of the most memorable or one of the most interesting times was we were out on one of the offsite scenes, and all of a sudden they're like, "Hey, John, come here." And it's me in the center, Scott Cooper on my left side, and Christian Bale on my right, looking through a video camera or, one of the cameras saying, what is this scene going to look like? What do we have to do? Are they wearing their uniforms right? And that was early on, and that really set the conditions for everybody as part of it, that to Scott, accuracy was important and discipline was important. And he would actually stop scenes if cadets were out of step just to get them in step. And then post-production, we got multiple phone calls. We're back. They would ask us to review commands that they could hear, things like that. So throughout it, we were truly embedded in the whole operation, very similar to being an advisor in Afghanistan, providing details, information, and help guiding them to a product that we should be proud of.
Yeah, I agree. When I was on those calls with John and Scott, from the very beginning, Scott was always trying to highlight the majesty of West Point. And that kind of came through in the film. It was permeated through, his staff. And when we were on set, again, in the execution phase, he would always ask for our feedback on the script. And even sometimes he would make changes. He was very easy to work with, an affable gentleman. He really made the experience worthwhile. We're on set every time he'd see us, he'd yell out West Point. He'd give us a high five or a fist bump, very encouraging to us. And again, when he asked for advice, like John was saying, we tried to provide him options. He would say, is it better to have the cadets here on this location? Or, we would say, Scott, we can support what you need. We had to be flexible. And so we'd often just give him a couple options and let him choose. And I think we had a very good, close working relationship with him.
So you talked a little mention here of the boot camp. Can you describe what you did to develop that, how long it was? Our day, what does it look like?
Yeah, that's probably a good description is our day. So what John and I did is, when we were given a Herculean task, right, we had to train up to 90 background actors. So you're talking cadets and officers, plus principal actors. And we were given 2 days to do it. So how do you do that? What we did is we storyboarded each scene. So again, having those meetings early on with Scott and his staff, Chris Sargent as well, we had an idea of some of the scenes where the camera positions would be. Obviously, we had our experience of what West Point looked like. So we would review each scene, develop like a PowerPoint slide, and figure out like how would this scene hit the screen. This is just our vision of what it would be. So once we kind of did that, we knew, hey, well, we could just teach these basic movements. So an example would be, we're not going to teach counter columns or to the rear march, right? We would place them in left shoulder arms and they give them the command to forward march, trying to make it as easy as possible for the actors. And it's kind of funny, those storyboards that we created have no way representative of what was on the screen. So, I have to give a nod to the creative folks out there. I'm an engineer by trade, I think very linearly. So that was the part of us just having to be, flexible.
And the one thing I'd add is, so we took the drill manual that the cadets used from that time period, from the 1820s. And when you read that drill manual, one, it's different from what we do now, right? So we had to learn it, and then I had a background in it and I understood it. And then working, with Mike Diaz and trying to make sure that we're using the right things from the museum, the right actions. But as Mike said, we had to simplify it. So if you imagine taking our new cadets on, our day and expecting them to march throughout as if they were, first, second, third, and fourth year cadets, it really took a lot of time to be able to do that, to include learning how to do artillery pieces for the scene where Poe gets demerits, which is actually one of my favorite scenes because it reminds me of my life as a cadet. I fully admit I had a lot of hours when I was a cadet. But so trying to learn, make sure we could master what was supposed to be, and then simplifying it to the executable was one of the most exciting tasks. And during that boot camp, one of the things that really impressed me is Harry Melling, who played Poe. Most people know him from Harry Potter, but who plays Poe. He showed up, and he's as a principal, we had a separate boot camp for him. But the type of person he is, and really the type of leader, he showed up at the same boot camp that the other 90 background actors and just melted in as if he was just a background actor. And that both Harry and Christian throughout the whole experience, both of them reminded me of, what you expect a leader to be, which is to be present, humble, and supportive of everybody else there. And Harry was just a great example of that during the boot camp. And we could give thousands of examples of Harry and Christian and Scott doing that, which was great to see.
Yeah, Harry threw himself into the role. And what was funny is, like, of all the background actors, when we taught, say, how to load and fire a flintlock, Harry was actually the best at doing it. So we would rank them in line order. And it was funny because the worst was, I don't know if I can say this or not, but was a Navy ROTC cadet. So Harry's the best. And then, at the other end is Navy ROTC. So I kind of give you an idea.
Which we expect.
But yeah, of course.
You always have to have a beat Navy in everything you do. Right?
I mean, the assistant directors came in and they were like, is there some kind of bias going on here? I mean, we had a good laugh about it.
All is fair in Academy challenges here.
That's right.
Oh my goodness. So you were working with the property master. You mentioned the rifles that you were using. Could you just explain that with the armorers and the film staff and how all of that collaboration came together for not only the boot camp, but also the on-film final product, not only in the historical accuracy, but also in just the execution phase?
Well, we had a great team of professionals. I mean, I remember the first day that we met Chris Peck and Steve Avenshine and Frank House, the Armors, was at the 31st Street Studios in downtown Pittsburgh. It's a converted steel mill. We had there's a prop shop that we all just met in, and I guess from that day forward, we formed a really close bond. I mean, we're still on text messages to this day. Today, we were texting back and forth. So that's the kind of friendships and professional relationships that we've made just from this opportunity. And I learned a ton about flintlocks from the period. And, that was from Frank and Steve taking the time to explain flintlocks to me. And then I was able to teach the background actors on flintlocks. Going into this, I didn't really know a whole lot about, to be honest with you. And so what my takeaway is just the living history of the film. You can read history in a book, but when you see it in action in front of you, it just gives it more authenticity and it's more memorable in my mind. So
I'd really like to highlight Frank, Steve, and Chris. When you talk about the quality of people, all the way down. I mean, everybody talks about the A-listers, right? Harry or Christian, right? What they often gets lost is Chris just came off of working Top Gun 2 as the prop master for that. Frank was has built Mel Gibson's in the movie The Patriot. He built Mel Gibson's flintlocks and all the weapons that he used. Steve is all the weapons that people have used in Jurassic Park, specifically the knives. That's the level of people that Scott brought in because he thought it was so important to do this right because of West Point. And I would say in execution, one of the biggest questions that we get is, it's winter, John. Why are they wearing white pants? Are you like, do you forget that? I mean, you're only work down the street. And there were some decisions that Scott talked through and we worked out, but that Scott, like any commander, will make a decision and take risk on. And the white pants I just bring up as a great example. And it's because he wanted that iconic West Point look. So when you think of West Point, you think full dress over white. So, the grad parade or all the parades. So what Scott wanted to do, even though it was in the winter, and some of the old grads have really pointed this out, that he wanted that view for everyone to see and the highest level of dress and the sharp and crispness of that. So as we talk about, as we go through, there were some decisions made that we got to advise on, but were made for the best reasons. And just like any commander, you take in the information and you make a decision. And that's a great example where I think it came out awesome on the film and it really stood out and showed West Point in a good light.
And not to mention it's a fiction.
Yeah.
Right. And it's based on the book, right? So it's gone from the print version to the screen, and it is fictitious, but also historical relevance. But you do get a little liberty in creating that when you have that artistic liberty gets to shine through. And sometimes it is to make the point and have those iconic images that people really connect and resonate with outside even just our small network. Around.
The old grad network's tough, though. They're, they can pick these things out.
Right. They've experienced that cadet in the red sash. Right. They know better. It sounds like you got to relive that a little bit in boot camp, too, as the cadet in the red sash there. Yeah. So you're going through this film industry now as this, another career opportunity post West Point, post some of your other endeavors or simultaneous. John, you're still here at the Academy in the athletics department. What have you learned about the industry and making movies? Like we just said, it's creative liberties and how that goes.
One of the things that I was really surprised about is the level of discipline and planning that goes into it. From a outsider's perspective, you think everybody is, much more looser, maybe a little disorganized. But as I went through it right from the beginning, the first phone call with Scott, and it permeated all the way down, and it's really commander's intent. He made it very clear that he wanted an excellent production that was going to be done in such a way that it shows West Point in a specific way and as accurate as possible. And then really what you saw with that is there were timelines, there were shoots, shoots. You had your planning session, you did rehearsals, and then you did execution. You did an AAR every day or an after action review. And then we reshot, and it reminded me of, doing an operation where you're at the National Training Center and that level of, hey, this is what we're doing tomorrow. Here's the plan, executing all the way down to the lowest person, or an athletic coach where they have a game plan, you execute it, you make adjustments as you go, and you make changes. But it was definitely a disciplined, coordinated effort that all the resources that went into it, I was just truly amazed by.
I guess I'd sum it up in 3 things. Don't step in the snow, organized chaos, and just one more take. And the way I explain that is John and I, coming out of boot camp, we were pretty popular guys because everybody knew us. Scott said it was the best boot camp he ever saw, which, we felt pretty proud that, they would take the time to attend boot camp and see what we were doing. But we show up. So the opening scene, if you remember when Captain Hitchcock is summoning Landor, John and I show up. It's like 4 a.m. They're making snow on set. I had my, my computer bag. John had his backpack. And, 90% of the time on set is just trying to get out of the way. So we're like, let's get out of the way. Let's stand here. And then Chris comes over with the loudspeaker. He's like, if you're standing in the snow, you're wrong. We look down. We're standing in the snow that they just made. So that was like, welcome to the film industry for us. And then organized chaos, I explained a lot what John said. It's a well-oiled machine, logistics kind of runs the show. And everybody had their job. So, it's run by the union quite a bit. So, people had to do their job, do it well, and it all came together. When you're looking at it, it's like ants running around on the ground. But you saw the final product when you watched the movie. We were down again in that 31st Street Studios, and I remember walking through one of the buildings, and they had pictures of all the locations that they were planning to shoot at. And then I heard some of the old grads saying, why'd you pick this location and that? It's very hard. Some of this is set well before we showed up, and they picked the locations that kind of best emulated the 1830s, although some of the obviously buildings and structures are, built after that time frame. And then I guess the last, like I said, the just one more time, I would submit to you that Christian Bale or any of those actors, they don't even know which take makes the movie. When I sat there, we were in the cemetery. They must have said those lines 50 times. And I don't, Scott in his mind, he's obviously thinking I have to get the light right, whatever. And so it became a running joke, which I'm sure it does on a lot of movie sets, is, just one more time from the director means you can be there for about 10 more hours.
It's like the last 2 minutes in basketball, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Just goes on forever.
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay. But let's be honest, right? Like in all good operations, no matter how much you plan, something goes wrong, right? And you try and plan for the worst and hope for the best, but it is what it is. They get the opportunity to edit in film, of course, but what did not go well, and how'd you react? How'd you either scramble to fix it or shake it off and say, okay, let's roll with it? Or
we weren't experts on artillery at the time. I know the pieces came from like Ligonier, which is a park there located in Western Pennsylvania. And some of the prop pieces, when they were swabbing out the bores, didn't fit. We didn't really exactly know how to kind of best set it up. And I don't know, John and Chris and I, this happens like right before lunch. And they're like, we have to teach these cadets, how to conduct artillery. Chris was, set on certain props, and John was pushing back. I'm kind of in the middle. Things got a little heated. Everybody's got their opinion. At the end of the day, we just want the scene to be right and historically accurate, right? So John and I spent the time over lunch YouTubing, getting up to speed, making sure we had everything right, and we weren't prepared for that. And that happened quite a bit. So when you look on screen, you would never know that. I mean, it turned out like a well-oiled machine, like these cadets knew exactly what they were doing.
I think a good way to put it is you react to contact, right? We always say the enemy has a vote. In this case, things change on set or things happen and you figure it out. And another good example is they're very limited on who can speak because based on union rules and part of the Actors Guild and all those rules that, to be quite honest, Mike and I were learning on the fly, that the production side of it, one of the cases, and you see it when they're out at Westminster, they're drilling out in the middle of kind of a quad area. And it's when you see Poe kind of looking, he's in formation and he kind of looks out and he falls back, but they're doing manual of arms or drilling ceremony. And there's no way we were going to be able to create a silent drill team, in the 12 or so hours that we had for boot camp. So we had to go back and convince them that Nick, one of the background actors, he was a cadet platoon leader, had to be able to speak. He had to be able to make the calls, like right shoulder arms, present arms, whatever the calls were at the time. And we went through that multiple times. And kind of the lower level to mid-level commander or the staff were like, hey, no, he can't speak. You can't do it. So Mike and I went up to Scott and and this is really where I respect Scott Cooper and Chris and Tracy. We went up to him and just said, hey, we can't do this. This is going to look like garbage if they try and do it silently. We need Nick to be able to speak. Wasn't even a question. Scott, Tracy, and Chris are like, okay, boom, we're going to make this happen. And then you hear him when they're making the calls or the drill calls, that's Nick. And what's really neat is his older brother is a West Point graduate. So he, just after the film came out, he went and saw it with his brother. And they were talking about what a great memory it is, to have his grad brother there. And it's his little brother acting in a movie, getting to do these commands. And we just had to adapt, and Scott allowed us to do it. And that kind of level of respect and basically adaptability was something that we just experienced throughout the whole time.
And Nick, he texted us and he was so grateful because, with him getting a speaking part, he was also invited to the premiere, a once in a lifetime opportunity for him, and very grateful. So, at next time John and I are in West Point, we're going to take him out to our favorite watering hole up at Silkies.
Well, speaking of that, one of my favorite things is that little tiny comment about Benny Havens. So how did that get squeaked into it? Because that's kind of a thing that, the Highland Falls and West Point community knows, but I'm not so sure if that's like outside of that realm, right? Is that something maybe in that pre-scripting read that kind of got snuck in?
It was great because as we started going through the script and, in October, and there's some references to it in the book, but Scott allowed us to just make the recommendation. And then it was, he did it. It was a really neat, because that's one of the best feedback that we get is, oh my gosh, they're talking about Benny's, and obviously it's not the Benny Havens that's, down on Main Street in Highland Falls right now. But even the young cadets understand what Benny Havens is. And that was just such a cool thing to have included.
Yeah, that historical piece was one of those little inside West Point jokes, yes. I think, that people caught on to pretty quickly and really reacted well to. Okay, so I wanted to have a little mini lightning round, which I know you're probably like, oh, great.
Lightning round, what's that mean?
You got to answer first thing, one word right off the top of your head, and we're going to go with it, okay?
Okay.
Favorite food on set, John?
All the coffee.
Mike?
Soup.
What did you wear to keep warm, Mike?
Onesie from my fly fishing apparel.
John?
not enough clothes.
Oh, goodness. Favorite location to shoot in? Mike?
Westminster College, because one of the actors gave us a hoodie.
I said one word, Mike.
Oh, geez, I'm not playing right. I'm sorry.
John?
Ice House.
Yeah, that was a great location. That was a really great location. The cabin was pretty cool, too.
The cabin was cool. The Ice House is actually on the river, which you don't get to see. So I'm an outdoors guy, so I love the river. And it was in a park.
I lost my phone in the Ice House. I threw it away after cleaning up after the background actors.
Okay, so another thing we didn't plan for.
I know. Okay, let's get back to the lightning round. It's going very slow.
Where did you first see the final version? Mike?
Netflix.
John?
New Jersey. In the theater.
In New Jersey, okay. Milk Duds or M&Ms? John?
Milk Duds.
Mike?
M&M's, Mike Mazzocco.
I had to set the last one up a little bit. Well, guys, really appreciate you coming back on and all the photos that you shared with us, the interviews that we had on the release date. Netflix has been great collaborating with us as well, giving us set photos. We really want to appreciate them and thank them for that. A lot of grads responded really well to this, and we're really excited for you. So the last tidbit of information, how West Point connected you, how it helped you get to this point. What should future grads, if they're interested in industry, how should they go about getting into it would be my final question for both of you.
I'll let Mike talk about definitely about connecting to future jobs and stuff because he's already done it. But I'd say that West Point really prepared us for this in a couple of ways. One is the discipline and the readiness to be able to react to opportunity, right? 25 years in the military plus working here and being a cadet, it teaches you the discipline to be able to take an opportunity and act on it. Also how to build or work with a great team around you. And we've talked about the people on set, but Mike referenced it, our families were great for supporting us. My wife and son, our friends, my coworkers, right? And I think that's where West Point teaches you how to build teams and make opportunities out of things. And I think that's one of the things that I'd like, between our families, our friends to allow us to go do this opportunity. And then the friends and the teams we built on set is really the lesson from West Point.
Yeah, the way I'd answer it is, West Point taught us to think critically, stay flexible, perform under stress, and cooperate, right? So we're always solving problems on set. I mean, there were things that came up. We talked about them. And, at the end of the day, we formed great bonds with people we just met. John and my friendship have never been stronger. So we worked collaboratively, John and I, and cooperated. And we were in constant communication. So I'm very humble. I'm honored to, represent West Point and have this opportunity. But I guess the biggest success is maintaining my friendships and the professional relationships.
Yeah, and Mike said something, you learn to cooperate and graduate. I think that's one of our biggest compliments from working on this film, from everybody involved. I mean, we still email Scott Cooper and we talk to Christian and Harry, and it's about how they've never had people who were willing to just do whatever it took to make the film a success. And I think to me, that is West Point, right? And the Army in a nutshell is how do you build that team to cooperate together, to work under stress. And that team, I can't highlight enough, involves everybody behind who allowed us to go do that. And I think that's the thing. Cooperate and graduate applies to everything.
Yeah, supported by everybody. Well, thanks again, Mike, John. I really appreciate not only the background information, but looping us in also on the West Point Museum supported the film. And we look forward to your next projects. You got any hints that you can leave us with real quick?
Well, I was working on a movie, or it's an Apple TV miniseries coming out next year. It's called The Chief of War, starring Jason Momoa. It's about the unification of the Hawaiian Islands under King Kamehameha in the 1790s. I was working as an armorer on the flintlocks that, the expertise that I gained under this film. And John's got some work maybe lined up here at the end of the month.
What's interesting, I'll just leave it. We're working with some other grads on them trying to get into this. And one of the probably the biggest other lessons we learned is OPSEC is not just a thing in the military, and non-disclosure acts and not being able to like publicize stuff has been really interesting. So quickest way for somebody to lose their ability to do this is if we're helping give advice is go ahead and talk about what you're working on, because you'll lose it. And I don't say that just because that's actually a thing both Mike and I were drilled into our heads right from the beginning.
We had to keep quiet for a whole year. Couldn't share pictures, anything like that. So yeah, I think we did a great job on that.
Different level of secrecy, clearance, right?
That's correct.
Well, thanks again, guys. It's been great talking to you. Really appreciate reaching back out to WPAOG so that we can help tell your story and the great success you've had professionally in these roles.
Thanks, and have a great day.
Thank you, Jamie.
Beat Navy.
Beat Navy.
This has been a production of the WPAOG Broadcast Network. Please take a moment to rate and review the show and join us each week for a new episode. Thank you for listening.